A blossoming romance wrapped up in the conflict of social standings is definitely an idea that a lot of people are drawn to. It's the romance that was never meant to be, the star-crossed lovers, so to speak. And Emma, A Victorian Romance is definitely one such series that fits that bill. But this is my review of this series. I got a review copy from Nozomie Entertainment and Rightstuf to check out, so let's jump into the review. When I first seen Emma, A Victorian Romance back in 2005 to 2007 when it originally aired, I honestly did not have much interest in the series. To think the idea of a Japanese anime of a Victorian London romance story just didn't really seem at the time that it would actually fit my taste. But as the series got a DVD release, and then later on, Rightstuf and Nozomie Entertainment launched a Kickstarter in order to dub and to repurpose the source material to a Blu-ray, I kind of sort of had to start taking note. Especially when the series got about $250,000 worth of backing, it obviously means that there's quite a fandom behind this series, so there's gotta be something here. Personally, I'm not a big fan of romance in anime. Typically, I find them to be quite melodramatic, or they rely too much on the concept of miscommunication or just a complete lack of communication. But oddly enough, this is something that I had not found to be the case with Emma, A Victorian Romance. The series takes place in England during the turn of the 20th century. It follows two specific characters, one being William and one being Emma. And while William is part of a family that is, while not noble, is very rich and able to walk amongst the nobles, Emma is a commoner who works for a previous governess. And this previous governess, Kelly Stonard, is actually a previous mentor of William Jones.
Do you remember how I told you I was once a governess?
Yes.
This is the young master I cared for, William Jones.
Young master?
I presume you've stopped wetting the bed?
Of course I have. Ages ago.
At the time, the Jones family still had a rather modest presence amongst the gentry. How is your father these days? Is he well?
He is. Very well.
And while William is visiting his previous mentor, he meets Emma and is quickly captivated by her. Thus begins this romance between the two of them that will obviously see many obstacles. Emma is obviously a commoner, and William is a part of a family that is trying to stay within the nobles' status, and obviously, that cannot happen. Their love cannot happen between the two of them. And while William is the oldest of his family and thus be next in line to take over the family business, his father obviously does not want him to tarnish that name. And the two of them have already been clashing before, as William is kind of aloof. He does not focus on his work. He's often daydreaming and thinking of other things, and doesn't really seem to have much of a drive to take on the business itself. So the idea of him somehow getting some kind of allowance from his father is just not going to happen. He has to prove himself to his father, and even then there's still going to be a lot of issues with him being able to have the life that he wants to have.
The peerage revolves around polite society, and as businessmen, part of our work is taking part in that society.
That may be so, but
There is a ball this evening that you will attend, no matter what. I've taken the liberty of responding for you.
yes, sir.
And through the eyes of Emma, we really get a perspective of the commoner's life working for Kelly Stonard, obviously her past and what she's gone through in her past, and ultimately her unwillingness to allow William to basically destroy what he has in order to be with her. Other notable characters that really do get involved with the situation obviously is the rest of William Jones's family. Arthur Jones, his younger brother, who doesn't want to take over the family business as well. His sister Grace, who is often kind of trying to keep everybody from fighting against each other. Vivian, who is kind of the hot-headed younger sister who just does not like anything being out of place that will cause issues for her life.
It's time for you to pack it up and go home, you little enchantress. We're wise to your wicked tricks. I can forgive Will for being gullible, but your audacity is another matter. You're a servant, understand? He's a master. You're not fit to scrub our floors, let alone...
Vivi, no.
Let me go.
Who is that?
That would be Vivian.
Hakeem, which is William's best friend, who is absolutely fantastic and seemingly The voice of reasoning for him of him doing what he wants to do rather than what his father wants him to do. More of a voice of freedom and a voice of doing what you want to do rather than what you have to do.
You did all this just now?
It was simple, really. I can redecorate your room this way too, if you like.
No, one room is enough, thank you.
You really do need to learn how to relax.
And later on, we mix in the Campbell family that get involved with the Jones family and a possible arranged marriage. So getting into my thoughts of the series, as I mentioned before, I am not really much of a fan of romance anime. And it's not that I don't want a romance anime, it's that I feel in most cases it just does not do it properly. Whereas I think Emma A Victorian Romance actually pulls it off very well. There was never a moment of melodrama in this series. Characters in most cases speak what they think. You don't really have any cases where characters just don't speak up and say what they want to say. Yes, granted, technically with William Jones, there's a lot of cases where he can't speak what he wants to say just because it will technically cause a large amount of conflict or disapproval from his father. It's not really a case where the two of them don't communicate what they believe and it doesn't turn into a unnecessary drama beat that typical anime usually relies on. And I really do respect that about the series. Oddly enough, for the most part in the first season, it really did seem like there wasn't really much romance to be had. And I think that's mainly because the story takes its time to kind of introduce you to the two main characters, Emma and William. And what happens is you end up having kind of this paralleling story where the two of them are doing their usual routine, while every now and then having these brief moments to speak to each other and to get to know each other. And I think what this allowed the story to do was to really kind of get to know these characters really well. William, his status in his family, what he goes through on a daily basis, the expectations that his father has for him, and essentially this slight gossip that starts happening on the idea of, can somebody of prestige standings be able to actually be with a commoner? What the stigma is around that? What his father thinks of it, what his family thinks of it. All these elements are coming to play while it's telling a story. It tells about his kind of aloofness, his inability to do what he wants to do, his kind of duties that he is responsible for, and all while kind of being tilted a little bit by his friend Hakeem, who likes to live the life of luxury. He likes to do what he wants to do. If he wants to jump onto an elephant with a bunch of ladies and ride onto the sunset, he'll do it.
Who's there? It seems you've taken a bath with your clothes on. Must be an English tradition.
And it's kind of these little elements that are slowly kind of building William as a character. On the other side, you have Emma as she's doing her daily routines, working for the governess, and all the while kind of being pursued by many people. There's seemingly a lot of people who find her very beautiful. And her constant rejection of them and just wanting to kind of be alone. But eventually, through William and his cheesy setup meetings, through acting like he's buying stuff from a shop and just happens to see her out the window.
Huh? There's Emma! I'll buy this spoon here. Never mind the change.
He doesn't have to buy something every single time.
She kind of gains a love for him and likes to be around him, likes his company, likes his charm, likes his kind of very natural self. And what this ultimately led to is in the later moments when you do have them start to have actual feelings for each other and want to express that, it creates the divide that we ultimately are expecting. The idea of the family is not going to allow it. The idea of the class divide between the two of them. The idea that William, in doing so, will basically ruin his entire family. And the weight of that obviously weighs on not only William's shoulders, but also Emma herself, causing her to ultimately flee from the situation. And this is where the story kind of gets a lot more complicated, as we do see William end up being kind of pursued by the Campbell family. His father has obviously kind of set him up with a girl named Eleanor, who is part of the Campbell family. And Eleanor's almost immediate love of William Thus begins an additional divide upon the idea of Emma and William eventually getting together. As you see, we now have this idea of, here is the option that will make my family happy, will cause us to have success, and me personally will probably grow in social standings, versus throwing away my entire life, throwing away my family, shaming my family, but being with the one that I love. And that is like the pinnacle point of the story itself and the ultimate climax of the story itself. But then also becomes the only thing I really hate about the story itself is William. While I do understand the thought process of William and the stress and burden that's being placed upon him, at the same time, the decisions that he makes are very kind of self-destructive in the end. And it ultimately, decisions that made me not really like him as a person. While I do want certain characters to be happy in the story, and I do, like the romance itself, ultimately his decisions are kind of damaging to a lot of people around him. And it, unfortunately, while he does acknowledge what damage he does, in the end, there seems to be no repercussions for it, other than challenges that he must overcome, obviously. Those issues aside, I still enjoy William as a character. He's kind of the character that you kind of want to root for. He's a character who's kind of being thrown into circumstances that he doesn't necessarily want to be a part of, but it's similar to the idea of the commoner, where they didn't choose to be a commoner, but they have to live in that. He was thrown into a rich family that's trying to be nobles, and it's not necessarily that he wanted to be thrown in that family and those responsibilities that were put upon him, even though you would say, yeah, he lives a life of luxury. It's still responsibilities and restrictions that are put upon him that he never asked for when he was born. That being said, the overall cast of the series is absolutely fantastic. I cannot say enough about Hakim. I thought he was pure gold in this series. I almost want a Hakim, a Victorian romance story series in itself. He was just absolutely fantastic. I really do love his character, his kind of him being put inside of a very strict situation, kind of giving the perspective of somebody saying, look, do what you want to do. Do you want Emma? Go after Emma. What are you waiting for? The friendship between him and William was absolutely fantastic. There was 2 points in this series where I literally said, this guy is like the best friend you can ask for. This guy is absolutely incredible. The Meredith family was great. I really did like that particular arc. Kelly Stoner was fantastic. Really did love her character. Very so much kind of the big, the grandma of the show that you just want to, that you just absolutely adore. Eleanor was fantastic. I really do feel for her, even though I don't like her father at all. He is kind of technically the representation of everything that was bad about the idea of the class systems and the divides that were there. William's father is complicated because I do think he's a fantastic character in the idea that he is a father that wants best for his family, but he's also somebody who doesn't realize what's in front of him. And yes, technically that is an idea that you would often get, unraveled over time. He is still a character who kind of represents the idea of a father who is willing to do anything for his family and will not kind of allow his family to ruin themselves at the same time. A father knows best kind of concept, even though sometimes father doesn't know best. Overall, the story kind of fits into a almost 2-arc storyline, one being the parallels of William Jones and Emma as they live their respective lives, slowly kind of meeting each other and getting to know each other in these brief little moments. And then the story kind of transfers into a separation period where the two of them both separately kind of try to find what they're missing and eventually realize it's each other, and then that fight to basically try to get together in the end. And I think these story arcs do very well in both cementing the characters separately and really kind of building them and their personalities separately, and then eventually that fight to come together in the end, which ultimately leads to a very satisfying climax. When it comes to the presentation itself, I really did like the work they did on the series. The music, the setting, the visuals are very beautiful, very Victorian. The styling itself was really great. And now, I'm not a huge fan of some of the character designs. I think that it really kind of captured this time period very well. And thankfully, in the Blu-ray release of this series, I didn't really find any problems with it, besides maybe some areas where you do have kind of fogging and stuff. It doesn't really transfer to an HD element very well. But overall, I didn't really have any problems with it. It actually looks very, very good. Also with this Blu-ray release, of course, is the new dub that was done for it. I ended up watching about 99% of this series on the new dub. And I have to say, they did an incredible job with the series. There was maybe a line here or there with some side extra characters that felt a little off. But for the most part, matching dialogue with the characters themselves, making it fit the particular scene, the accents and everything that was in there with it, they did an incredible job. I will probably look into Hakim himself because I love that character and I loved his voice. But yeah, typically I don't really care much for dubs, but this being a dub release, obviously a main point of reviewing this would have to be in the dub itself, and I think they did a stellar job with that dub. It feels very natural. It actually fits the Victorian setting, and I cannot say enough about it. This will probably have to go alongside the likes of Cowboy Bebop in a dub that I actually liked, so that's some good points right there. So in the end, Emma A Victorian Romance becomes an absolute gem for me. It was a series that I literally didn't really know much about, didn't give much note to it back when it was first released, and ultimately came to love the series. And it's mainly because it is a romance series done right in my eye. It's a romance that doesn't rely on melodrama. It's a romance that doesn't rely on miscommunication or lack thereof. It's a series that naturally builds its characters, throws them into the divide of societies at the time, and really shows these characters shine as they try to fight back against what was normal in that period of time. And I think it does a phenomenal job at that. Mixed in there with a lot of fantastic characters that I grew to love, even if they were characters I disagree with and characters I think were essentially playing into the social norms at that time that were ultimately what caused the divide to begin with. But they're characters that I understand. They're characters that I understand based on their current living conditions, and I understood that there was a reason why they thought what they thought. So yes, this series can finally go on my very, very empty shelf of my favorite romance animes of all time, which doesn't really have much in it, as you can tell. So with that said, I am truly thankful for Rightstuf and Nozomie Entertainment for essentially trying to give this a proper dub, for the people that backed the series, that eventually led to it landing on my doorstep and me being able to finally kind of discover a very gem series that I'm kind of saddened that I missed for so long. My only warnings I would give to people on this series is that it's a series that is technically pretty slow moving, as it takes its time to kind of build its characters and set you into the settings of the world itself. Some people might find that boring, but I actually found it very, very enveloping, and this time that it took allowed me to really kind of bond with the characters and find them very endearing in the end. So with that said, that is my thoughts on Emma A Victorian Romance, a series that, like I said, I am truly happy to finally have discovered, and I hope that if any of this sounds interesting to you guys, that you will check it out as well. But I thank you all for watching. I hope that you all enjoyed, and y'all take care.
You may enter.
Have you seen Mr. William?
Who is asking?
Mr. Jones hasn't heard any word from him. I thought you might know where he is.
Stevens, was it? Look.
Is that Mr. William's jacket?
Perhaps it is. In which case, perhaps I've been William all along and you've merely mistaken me for Hakim. Why not tell Mr. Jones his son already went to bed?
I might, if that were the case.
Come now, surely there's no need to say such boorish things.